FM, 101.9 megahertz of life.
Welcome to the ORT Jet Business Show. And it's just gone 6:10 on the 27th of February 2025. And we've got a great evening, and I'm really looking forward to this interview. It's with Fuhr. He's a serial entrepreneur. He started, which you might know, the Sorbet group. And we're going to ask him about his process with that and a number of different things that he's been involved in. But before we get there, Ian, I normally have a little business story that I give, and I'm going to give this little story. It's slightly different. So Rabbi Twerdsky, many, many years ago, I heard him give a talk about the lobster. And he said that the way the lobster grows is that I think they call it molting. So its body grows, and then it grows too big for the shell that it's in. So the shell's there to protect it, but internally it grows too big, and it has to go and shed that shell. And while it does that, it grows another shell, slightly softer, and it hides under a rock because now it's in danger. Its protection is gone. It knows that, but it still does that. And in fact, it does that many, many, many times. In the first 5 to 7 years of its life, it does it about 25 times. So it's almost about 5 times a year that it takes this massive risk to grow. The interesting thing about it, and what Rabbi Twerdsky said, was if the lobster had access to the medical advice of humans, it would never grow. Because when it felt the pain, it would then take some pills. It would go to hospital. It would find a cure for the pain, not realizing that these are literally what we call growing pains. And often, and by speaking to a lot of the entrepreneurs like yourself, and maybe you can pick up on it later, that things do go wrong and things are painful, but you work your way through it because that's part of the entrepreneurial journey. Linked to that is in America, I think it's in Arizona, they've got something called a biosphere 2. And they try to mimic what would happen if we lived on Mars. And they created an environment that was completely enclosed, and people went and lived in that with the environment creating its own resources. And that failed. And one of the big reasons it failed was after about 2 years, the big trees started falling over. And they realized that they couldn't recreate wind. And the trees needed the wind to fight against to strengthen their own roots. Again, another story like that. And so we've got to look through the pain of things and learn the pleasure that you come through that, but growing comes through these struggles. Correct. One of the things that recently I've started adopting with that, we live quite far from where my kids go to school, and I used to say, I have to take the kids to school. And I've changed that now to I have the opportunity to bond with the kids. Everything we go to has 2 sides to the coin. Which side do you focus on? It's human nature to focus on what's wrong, but if we can force ourselves to focus on the benefits of that. So yes, I have to take the kids to school, but I have this massive benefit of bonding with them every morning.
Sounds great.
Great.
Nice stories. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. So, but it's not about my story, it's about your story. So let me just give you some background to Ian before I start asking him some questions. He's the founder of the Sorbet Group, the largest chain of beauty salons in South Africa. He's the current CEO of Hatch Institute, and they help companies with both leadership and culture. And Ian will unpack how important culture is in all businesses. And he says, if you can get the environment right, if you can build a community of people that accept and respect and trust each other, then we have a much better chance of being successful in whatever business we're building. Interesting story that Ian, together with his brother, opened the first Kmart in South Africa. And if you think...
Indeed.
You think Kmart in South Africa, he was, I think, 22 years old.
Correct.
and started Kmart, not understanding that you need to get the license, etc., and ran it for about 10 years until he got sued by Kmart, and then he changed it to a company called Supermart, and eventually sold it to the Edcon Group and renamed Jetmart.
Right.
Ian has been in retailing, he's been in the music industry, and as we said, running the Leadership Institute. So Ian started the Sorbet Group in 2005 and initially opened 6 stores, and by 2009 the group had 22 stores, and when he finally sold it, it had 220 stores. Ian's the author of 4 books. It's The Entrepreneurial Journey, The Sorbet Story, Cultureneering, and The Human Bridge. He owned, as I said, in the music business, he owned a company with famous people being part of it, like Hugh Masekela. And in fact, Ian's father, Kenny, was a founding director of Russell's Store. So I'm sure you've heard that saying, we've all got an uncle in the furniture business. In Ian's case, he actually had a father in the furniture business.
Exactly.
And Ian will share with you the story, and we'll get to that a little bit later, with the Sorbet stores, which I love. When he started it and looking for people to run the stores, he actually thought he was looking for beauty therapists to become business people, and he found it was much more successful the other way around, by getting business people to adapt to the beauty industry.
100%.
So I want to ask you, Ian, if we can start off, the importance of a credible and viable business model, the significance of building culture and service philosophy. And part of it is because recently I went into a Sorbet store, and there was an offer for it to be free. If you're not happy with the service, it's for free.
Yeah.
And a lot of people would think that's a risk. So can you unpack your business philosophy for us, and something that maybe you think we could take as entrepreneurs?
Okay, thanks very much for that intro, David, and thanks for having me. So I think what happened over the years, right from the early Kmart days when I knew less than nothing, and by the way, we even used their logo, which wasn't so bright, and I realized, particularly then in the socio-political environment of the apartheid days, that the staff were not terribly interested in serving customers at that point in time. They were much more interested in freedom and what was happening outside of the organization, and working in the company was just a way to make a living. And so we had to change that, and then I started to focus on culture. And culture in this particular case, or in those days, was how do you get people in a diverse working environment to feel a sense of belonging in the company. And because until such time as you do that, it's highly unlikely they're going to go out there and serve to the very best of their ability. No employees come into the business every morning singing the joys of making profits for the shareholders. That is not why they're there. They don't really care about that. So the thing is, what is going to motivate them to go out there? And I often got asked, how did you motivate the 3,500 people at Sorbet? And the simple answer to that was, I didn't motivate any of them, quite frankly, because people have to motivate themselves. So my role was to try and inspire them to motivate themselves, and that was the key. And the only way I could do that was to make them feel comfortable in the environment. So everybody, regardless of their differences, would have a sense of belonging. They would feel trusted and respected. They would feel a sense of dignity and equality and fair treatment. They would feel that their contributions were valued, and that they had made a significant contribution to the business, that they were heard, they felt safe to speak up, etc., etc. All of those things that make people feel comfortable in the working environment. If you could create that, you would get what we call a common purpose.
So I want to come back to this common purpose.
Okay.
But at the radio station, we've also got a common purpose.
Okay.
And
yeah.
that is to make money through the ad break. So we'll be back after the break.
High FM, your station of choice since 2008.
Welcome back. I'm David Zeidel. This is the ORT Jet Business Show. I'm talking to Ian Fuhr, who has done many different things, but one of the greatest things that you might be aware of is the founder of the Sorbet Group. And he started talking about inspiring people and having a common purpose. But I want to go back a little bit before that. Just talk us through, how did you come up with the idea of starting Sorbet, and what were the actual steps? Because a lot of us have these great ideas and nothing ever happens from it. So if you can remember and take us back, how did you go from nothing to 220 stores?
Okay. So after I had sold the retail business to Edcon, I wasn't employed for about 6 months, thinking of something to do. And I was having a massage one day, and the lady that was doing the massage said to me, "Why don't you look at the beauty industry?" And I told her to have a good look at my face and see if that was the right face for the beauty industry. And she said that didn't matter, but the point was that there was a gap in the market apparently. So I asked her if there was a market in the gap, and she said yes. There are no beauty salon chains in the whole of South Africa under a single brand with multiple units.
So just if I can ask you, and you said it just off the cuff, is there a gap in the market, and is there a market in the gap?
Yes.
Just explain that.
Okay, well, if a gap in the market, we all understand, okay, there's an opportunity. But is there a market in the gap? In other words, is there a real business to be had there? And that's very nice to say that there's an opportunity, but can we make it work? And the reason for not having any chains was always quite fascinating for me, because that was the first question you ask. Why are there no chains? So what am I getting myself into here, where people have been before and obviously not been very successful? And I realized quite soon afterwards, which we can come back to later, was about consistency of service. You know, that if you're going to have multiple units of a particular brand, you need to be able to go into any of those, whether it's in Polokwane in the north or at the waterfront in Cape Town. You want to have the same service with the same attitude as well, which makes it even more difficult. So anyway, I decided, okay, this is worth taking a shot. I went and bought about 5 or 6 stores, independent beauty salons, under different names, just to learn the business. The name Sorbet, people say, what a great name. Quite frankly, I didn't think it was a great name afterward, because every time I went into a shopping center looking for space, they told me they already had ice cream stores. So that didn't work so well for me. So in fact, I learned there that it's not the name that builds a business. It's the business that builds the name.
Wow.
The name Sorbet sounded great after 200 stores. But in the beginning, it wasn't such a great name. But it was fun, and I liked the idea. It wasn't my idea, by the way. I didn't come up with that name. I went to an advertising agency, and they came up with a name. I asked them, I said, please give me a list of names that have nothing to do with beauty. Because in those days, there was lots of beauty salons, you know, Jenny's Nails and Beverly's this, and it was all very sort of traditional beauty type names. And I wanted nothing to do with beauty. I wanted everything that we did from day one to be different. But I think the really important thing about Sorbet, which very few people know really, is how it started from a culture point of view. So I had been developing this culture framework over many years, over all those various businesses that you spoke about, and learning and developing. So when I eventually sold Supermart to Edcon, I had this culture framework that I had been working on. And I was keen to use that culture framework in a new business.
So this was almost like an experiment, a culture experiment.
It was a culture experiment. I wanted to prove that this culture could work in a new business. So unlike a typical entrepreneurial startup where you have an idea and you try and build it and you tweak it and you scale it and then you build a culture, etc., etc., this was completely different. I already had the culture. I knew exactly what the culture was going to look like. All I needed was a business. And so it just turned out to be the beauty industry. It certainly was. You know, I knew nothing about beauty.
If you're just wondering who's spurring all these words of wisdom, it's Ian Fuhr, the founder of the Sorbet Group. And so you're telling us about the The culture. So you
Yeah.
started with the culture,
Yes.
and you use this culture experiment. So just explain that a
Correct.
bit more. How did you do that?
Okay, so what I did right from the beginning, I mean, I didn't understand the beauty business. I needed help in that. I mean, I thought a Brazilian was a person who lived in Brazil. so I mean, really, I knew nothing. And so I was just focused on the people side, and I got people to help me on the beauty side. So on the people side, I decided to have the induction training myself. I did the induction training for every person that ever joined the Sorbet group.
And that was obviously induction on running the business, not the beauty aspects or...
On the culture. It
On
was
the
mainly
culture.
on the culture. The running of the business, I had other people. In fact, I was very, very fortunate to have my 3 children involved, and my niece and my daughter-in-law and a few others. And they were all helping to run the business. I had other partners as well. And I was focused very largely on the people side. That's always been my interest.
So talk us through, when you say culture, what were the things that you were teaching these people when they joined the business? What did you focus on?
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. When I think back in the early 90s, somebody, in fact, taught me a lesson. I can't remember his name. Jerry Skatemer, his name was Jerry Skatemer. He was a political economist on TV, and he said to me, Ian, the purpose of work is not to make money; it's to serve. And he just said it like that casually, and I said, really, And then I started thinking about that, and then I thought, wow. And that became the game changer. That changed my life. It changed my management style. It changed everything. To me, if you can get that instilled into people's minds, that I come to work to serve the needs and wants of my customers, if I do that well, I'll make money. But unfortunately, most people come to make money. They want to earn a living. They want to do this. They want to improve their skills, etc., etc. And I say, no. Those things are rewards. They are not the purpose. There's a very big difference between purpose and reward. The purpose is to make people feel good in terms of the Sorbet story, because why do they come to beauty salons? They come because they want to feel good. And we want to make them feel good, and we want to make them feel better when they leave than when they arrived. So that was the first thing to share with everybody. That's why we exist. We don't exist to make money. Money is the reward. It's not the purpose. And once people got the hang of that and they started to buy into it, then it starts to improve the service, and they start to realize the impact of what they're doing, because it's not just now sitting there at a nail table or at a massage bed or whatever it is. It's now touching people's lives and making them feel good. And that's now a purpose, a proper purpose. And in fact, that's a privilege. It's not a job anymore. Most people think, I'm a nail technician, it's just a job, it's boring. It's not boring. And it's not repetitive, because every single time you sit opposite somebody, that's an opportunity to start a relationship with that individual. This is not just a job anymore. I mean, who gets that opportunity to build so many relationships over a period of time? You don't get that if you're working in the supermarket or wherever. So I just got everyone to understand that this was a unique opportunity to really do something meaningful and to touch people's lives in a positive way.
So that links beautifully back to what I was talking about earlier of you don't have to, you have the opportunity to. But it's okay if you got one little shop to try and teach people this. How do you get that message to go throughout everything and for people to properly buy into it, especially if somebody does need the money?
Right. So we never played down the importance of the money. We know how important the money is. We're just saying that it's the reward. It's not the purpose. So we get the sequence right. That's what it is. We don't for 1 minute say that you don't need money, or it's not important, or that you don't want to feed your family, etc. We all know how important those things are, but they come as a result of what you do, never the reason that you do it. Because when you focused on making money, you're going to cut corners, you're going to save costs, you're not going to give the service that the guests, we used to call them guests, deserve. So it was just about changing the mindset of why people come to work and what they needed to do. And once we started to get that right, and the people started to realize the importance of what they were doing, all of a sudden the loyalty starts building and people keep coming back because they're getting not just good service but a great attitude as well. So attitude becomes the kicker. When it comes to sort of technical stuff, the technical service, how to do the set of nails, how to do a facial, whatever it is, many other people out there are doing the same as us. We never claim to do the best nails, the best facials. What we did want to do is we wanted the attitude of the employees to be much better than what was out there. We wanted people to say, wow, this is different, this place. I feel good here. I feel that I'm important.